as Alan would, Central Bedfordshire's #1 Dallas Cowboys fan, probably. Just reflecting on a fantastic campaign from the Dallas Cowboys this regular season, finishing #2 seed and locking up the NFC East, which is really important, of course, with the playoffs coming up. Some fantastic performances at an individual level. Dak Prescott leading in touchdown passes, Micah Parsons in pressures, Darren Bland in interceptions, and CeeDee Lamb in receptions. So some great performances across the board. We know this is a good team, but we know it's all about the playoffs now. Having that home advantage potentially until the NFC Championship game is massive, and to be consistent in the NFL is really hard. And as the season goes on, you can play in different teams, there's different narratives, and sometimes just some individual performers can really change a game. Maybe they're fighting for a contract, playing for something maybe you don't expect. And if you don't believe me, ask a Philadelphia Eagles fan. I'm sure they're hurting right now. I am loving it, and bring on the playoffs. How about them Cowboys?
Hello and welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast. The regular season is now complete as we're here to review Week 18. Of course, we have some episodes coming this week where we preview the wildcard games with fans of every team involved. And unfortunately, my guest today will not be on these episodes because his team didn't make it on the final day. With me today,
Uh,
back to me today is Seahawks
it's
fan.
already gone. It's already begun.
Well,
Pleasure to have pleasure to be here. It's been a while. I believe the last episode we did it was to predict actually how the Seahawks season went, and
mm.
now you'll pretty much get my summary of how the season actually went later on. So
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna get up at some point during the episode. Towards the end, we'll get up Javan's predictions from the start of the season, and we are gonna at some point in the next few days we're gonna reveal on our Twitter page, on Instagram pages, who exactly got the best scores from all the 32 teams predictions we did. So that should be a good episode. And of course, while we're on predictions, we did have the final segment of our regular season game prediction segment. So, of course, last week we had, as well as myself, we had Steve Hall from Redmen TV and also Jay Lawrence. Him and Steve both got 9 correct scores, whereas myself, I got 8. So the final table is as followed. And if you follow our Twitter page, you'd have seen it earlier on today. But Keg from the Magpie channel and Aaron Fletcher from the Secret Work, they both win. They both got 13 correct scores from week 6 and week 12, respectively. And then the rest of the score, it's Sky Pank, me, Scott McCabe, Shane Harris, David Caprosh, Graham Henderson, Ollie Hope, Ollie Butler Henderson, Steve Hall, Jay Lawrence, Freddie Harper Davis, David Figgins, Chris Milner, Phil Perrins with last place in 17th with 7 correct scores from week 7 is Steve McGuinness. So, of course, we are talking all things NFL and all things week 18. Just to confirm the teams that did make it in, obviously the division winners. We'll talk about that in the episode. So, first of all, the Pittsburgh Steelers secured their place in the playoff after a 17-10 win over a much changed Baltimore Ravens side. Going on to the other game on Saturday, which is our first talking point, is the Houston Texans taking on the Indianapolis Colts. Now, the winner of this game ended up being the winners of the division, of course, after the Jacksonville Jaguars did lose to the Tennessee Titans, 28-20. So this game beforehand, obviously, the day before this game happened, it meant a lot. The winner would have been guaranteed a place in the playoffs anyway, with a chance of a division win. Turns out they won the division. It's the Houston Texans as they won 23-19, as they will now face a wildcard round game at home to the 5th seed Cleveland Browns on this weekend coming up. And yeah, again, I thought it was a brilliant game. I thought it was both teams giving their all. Both teams, I think both teams really do themselves proud. I mean, CJ Stroud, I think if he hadn't already cemented this place as Rookie of the Year with a touchdown, a brilliant touch. I think it was 74 passing yard touchdown on the first play of the game for the Texans. And obviously they did end up winning it. Obviously Fairbairn missed the kick when they did get the winning touchdown, so it could have been costly if the Colts had scored the touchdowns to tie the game. But of course they were saved by the last gasp miss catch from Kylan Goodson, which ultimately saw the Colts eliminated and the Texans advance. But Javan, what were your thoughts on the game?
I was actually going to point out the fact that it was a game where both teams gave their all, and you kind of just saw it literally from the jump. Really, I mean, to for the Texans to connect like that very early on, I thought for a team like that, you know, a lot's been said about them this season. I thought they would take a while to get going, me personally, but you know. as soon as they got that first play touchdown, they didn't really look back. Of course, Colts were gonna, do whatever they can to obviously climb back into it. But I think the Texans were just resilient. And obviously you had that, last gasp drama, the miscatch. These things can happen in games like this. So when, seeing that unfold, it was just a thing of like, okay, well, in a game of this magnitude, you're gonna have a defining moment like that a lot. And unfortunately, it happened to the Colts.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if I'm honest, I think both teams can go away from not only this game but also the season really proudly. I mean, whatever happened for the Texans in the postseason, and I think certainly you look at Shane Steichen, you look at D'Amico Ryans. I think both of them, I think, have to be in contention for Coach of the Year. I think you look at Dan Campbell, you could put John Harbaugh in that category as well. But I think certainly them two teams that really no one thought would be at this stage of their progression doing so well. I mean, I think both teams, with new quarterback, you thought, the chances there for a team for the future. But I don't think anyone thought in year one of both the Steichen and the Ryan's era that they would be both battling out for the division on the final day or battling out for the playoffs on the final day. I think most people would have said a 6-7 win season would have been a great bit of progress. And considering the Colts as well lost their star quarterback I think it was halfway through the season. I think it was only 5 games in. It was when I was in London, so it would have been 5-6 games in to lose your star quarterback and have someone who has been a veteran, has been a journeyman, Gardner Minshew mostly as a backup. I think to do what he's done with what they've had, I think it's been a really, really big achievement. So I think both teams can really look at this sort of as his last year as a real positive 12 months.
Absolutely. I was literally writing in my notes before this, D'Amico Ryan probably. I'd probably give him Coach of the Year, really, just because of the fact that this is a Texans team that no one really expected to really be this far ahead of schedule. Now, obviously, what will happen after, whether they, regress a little bit in the next season, I think you can probably give D'Amico the benefit of the doubt if that were to happen, just because that team is just so beyond schedule. It's unbelievable that they've managed to, you know, make a season like this a fairy tale for them.
Yeah, and I think that you mentioned about regressing. I think that's really interesting to what the Jaguars, the fact that they have made the playoffs. This is despite being 8-3 and having in December putting out on sale playoff tickets or advertising playoff tickets being on sale. Not make the playoffs. I think it's almost the complete opposite of last season. What happened to them when they were, I think, 5-6, or they had a really bad start at the end. They turned it around, and the Titans collapsing meant that they again. I think this has to be one of. I mean, the Dolphins collapse is a bit less bad because we still made the playoffs. But I think for the Jags to be 8-3 after beating the Texans as well in week 11 or week 12, to then lose the division, where people were saying, trying to work out whether they can get a number one seed for the playoffs, and to not even make the playoffs, and to in the way they have and down the stretch has just been, I think, one of the more bigger collapses I've seen in the last probably 5-10 years of being an NFL fan.
Whew, that's a big statement. I'd have to probably look back through like my NFL memories or probably through NFL seasons to see a collapse maybe equally bad or much worse. But I probably would have to agree with you on that just because I actually had, a team like the Jaguars after, especially last year as well. I just thought that from last year, and especially how they won that playoff game against the Chargers as well, I just thought that, okay, this is where they're going to probably kick on and probably become a good team from this point out. And now they've taken a step back, and it's now you're in a kind of like period of uncertainty where it's just kind of like, okay, we've we had this really amazing high followed by this. It's not really a huge low, I would say. It's just kind of just them just taking, 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. Now they're just kind of just in the middle in purgatory almost. It's like, okay, now what do we do here?
Yeah, and I think that it's a really, I think, really fascinating division. The fact that you've got Stroud, you've got Levis, you've got Lawrence, and you've obviously we've got and you got Anthony Richardson. It's a division that's been ridiculed for years, and whereas now I think this is the division that for the future, provided nothing horrible happens in terms of injuries, I think this is the division that is going to be, I think, exciting for everyone. And I want to talk on it quickly. There's been some coaching firings in the last few days. Of course, there've been a couple that you'd expect. So Arthur Smith did lose his job as the Falcons head coach, and Ron Rivera, literally the morning after his birthday, lost his job as the Commanders head coach. But the one I think surprised everyone, a bit similar to Brian Flores a couple of years ago. I remember me and you have reacted to that at the time when
Yeah.
we were in uni together. But Mike Vrabel's lost his job. Now this has been, they've had 1.5 really bad years. But I was surprised they let him go because I think without him, I think it could have been a lot worse for the Titans this year.
They're probably just going into a new direction more than anything, I think, with that firing. I don't think it's a firing based on the fact that Vrabel's done a bad job because he's obviously had some great years there. But I think maybe the Titans probably just want to go into a completely new direction. Now, what that new direction is, I'm not really too sure. We'll have to see. We'll have to see once probably the Super Bowl is finished because then we'll start to see a lot of the new season kind of rumors pour on there. But yeah, I saw this firing just more as like, okay, they're just wanting to go to a new direction rather than Vrabel doing the bad job.
Yeah, and I do think that, I said in a group chat earlier that I think will be a bit like Andy Reid in when he lost a job in Philadelphia. I think he will get a job. I think within a day or two. I think he's got enough. 4 straight years with playoffs, and the last couple of years hasn't been good. But when you got he hasn't really had a good quarterback in his time. You give him a good defense and a good offense. I on both sides of the ball. I do think that will be. I think we'll see Mike Vrabel do an even better job, and I think that wherever he goes to, I think we'll be lucky to have him. And I think obviously New England's the obvious one. We don't know what's happening with Bill Belichick yet. The sources seem to suggest he's staying an extra year, but he could leave as well if they feel Vrabel is too good to turn down. I think he almost a bit like shares a lot of tendencies with Belichick, and obviously he's a lot younger. So I think that could be where they go. Other results on the Sunday, the much changed Cleveland Browns playing their backups lost 31-14 to the Cincinnati Bengals. The Detroit Lions did play their starters and did lose Sam Laporta to an injury. We don't know what the extent of that is yet, but they did win 30 points to 20 to secure the third seed. The Jets beat the Patriots for the first time since 2015 as they won 17-3. Fun little fact for you to mention on Red Zone, the first time in his career that or their whole franchise that the Patriots have lost in snow at all at home. The New Orleans Saints beat the Falcons 48-17, which would have won the division if the Buccaneers had beat the Panthers, but the Buccaneers did win an unconvincing 9-0. The Packers secured their playoff spot with a 17-9 win over the Chicago Bears. The Raiders beat the Broncos 17-14, and the Chiefs beat the Chargers by 13 points to 12, and the much changed Rams beat the much changed 49ers 21-20, and the Dallas Cowboys locked up the NFC East with a 38-10 win over the Washington Commanders. Now this has helped by a win for the New York Giants over the Philadelphia Eagles, which shocked everyone. And that is now 5 losses in the last 6 games, or 4 of their last 5. They only won 1 game in the last month. It's been a horrible stretch for the Eagles. It's been for a team that started 10-1 to now finish 11-6. That's not good enough. And I think that we mentioned before about the Titans last season, the Jags this year, hitting form at a bad time. You could put the Dolphins in that category as well. And I think that really, what this was proved, this proves once again, is that who cared how play well in the first 40 weeks? Who gives a damn? Because at the end of the day, if you hit injuries at this time of year like we have, or if you suddenly start losing form, it's the worst time to do it. So I think it's all good, all good going 10-1, all good beating the Broncos 17-20 in week 3. But you have to do it in week 17, 18. And I will mention Dolphins a little bit. I'll start my rage in a bit. But in terms of the Eagles, I think they have to be severely worried. I think the Buccaneers, obviously the best team they could have hoped for in the playoffs, but I still think the Buccaneers at home could easily beat the Eagles on current form. Just how have you assessed, Girvane, the current awful form of the Eagles?
I think I don't. Okay, so the question I probably want to ask you, I don't know if I want to ask this question because this is something that I believe is a question I shouldn't really ask about an Eagles team. But do we think that they've lost a sense of their identity during this stretch, or even maybe at the start, or even maybe from the start of the season, even when they were 10-1? Do you think they lost their identity even then during that 10-1 run, and that could probably have resulted in this?
It's hard. I think obviously the start of the year they lost a few coordinators. Everyone talks about last season, and it was, to be fair, it was an easier schedule last year. And I think that it's a whole different ballgame when you're the team that's the favourites or one of the favourites to win the thing, rather than a team that maybe people didn't think would make it last year. But they went 10-1, so they seem to disprove that theory that that was happening, and they seem to be just going things as normal. I don't think Nick Sirianni taunting the Chiefs fans has helped at all. I think that's not been a good look, and that's really looked to come back and bite him in the backside. So I think I do think I don't really know what's happened, because they have seemed to be playing no different to how they were playing early in the year. And I don't know whether it's a case of they were just easy, they were just haven't been winning games, but they've been found out. I don't know, but and it seems to be, for me, they find it easier to score from a tush push 1 yard out than they do from 10 yards out at the moment. So it's really fascinating. I don't really know what's gone wrong really, because it's the same players and pretty much the same coaching staff. I know Matt Patricia came in, but can you put it all on him? I don't know. It's yeah, that's one I've really been stuck by, because it hasn't really, they haven't had any big injuries. Brown and Smith are still there. Hurts is still there. The O lineman is still there, as far as I'm aware. The defense is still there. Maybe it's 1 year too much for some of these players like Kelsey and Johnson and Graham. I don't know. Maybe last year was the swan song, but either way, I do feel, I know we're going to go into our Bucks Eagles preview later on in the week in this podcast, but I do think they can go one and done. I do think they'll lose. They'll probably lose to the Bucks, in my opinion, on current form. They've been awful. And yeah, the win 2 weeks ago hasn't seemed to have changed that or given them a confidence boost they needed. So yeah, really, it's been shocking, really.
One thing I'll add is you don't if because my opinion is they probably have lost their identity at some place at some point. I'm not sure when, but you don't want to find it come playoff time. There's always a risk here. However, that being said, if there is one team in the well, actually, there's probably two teams in the NFC that can probably lose form and find it somehow in playoff time, just based on the fact that they've been in the playoffs a lot, and that's probably Dallas and probably Philadelphia, really, just because of the DNA that these organizations have. And personnel is probably important here. Experience is definitely important here. I would trust the Eagles personnel. Okay, fair enough. If your prediction is for them to lose, then I would expect the Eagles to probably give it all, and if they just lose to a Bucks team that is just crazy effective in that match, then so be it, I guess. But one thing I'm really fearing is the identity is gone. You try to find it come playoff time, and then come playoff time, you have no idea. Like, it's like the game passes you by from minute one. It's what I fear for the Eagles.
Yeah, and I think that it's really is concerning, and I think that they, especially being on the road as well. I know the Tampa Bay isn't exactly like a Philadelphia even, or Baltimore, where it's an absolute fortress or fierce place to go. No one really, I don't think anyone goes to Tampa Bay concerned about the fans and being having to go by the silent count or anything like that. I do think that it's they're lucky in that sense that they aren't playing Dallas away, they aren't playing the 49ers or even the Lions away. I think that would be even more of a scary prospect. But I do think even if they do beat the Buccaneers, they'll then face you think most likely probably either the Cowboys or Niners, depending on what happens with the Rams Lions game. And I do feel like that will be where they're getting stuck. And I think that the 49ers had about enough form. They've come back and been pretty much unstoppable ever since, only losing one game, I think, since that stretch. And that was only because they were, or two games even, and that was only one of them because they were resting starters. So for me, the Eagles, yeah, I do think potentially last year was maybe a bit of a, not a fluke, but maybe they just had that easier schedule and they just hit form at the right time, and maybe it was at last. We've seen it with footballers. John Terry had a great year, and then next year he was terrible and left the club, and Steven Gerrard the same thing. And these players, they had these amazing last years, and then it almost appears that it's that the next year is almost 1 year too much. My worry is that they've kept a lot of the old guard, and it seems right now that maybe um, Father Time is maybe getting to a few of these players. So yeah, interesting time for them, and I do feel like it's I still think they'll be a team next year. That will be a team to be one of the favourites, particularly in their conference. But I don't think I don't see them going back to Super Bowl anytime soon unless they do some amazing Harry Roseman magic again in the draft. I don't know, but yeah, I think that they could potentially be another one of these Super Bowl hangover one and done teams. Now our penultimate game we want to talk about was involving your team, Javan. Obviously, ultimately, it didn't matter if you won the game because the Packers did win, but you did beat the Cardinals 21-20 thanks to a last second, I think it was last second, field goal miss from Matt Prater. Your thoughts on the game?
I think, for we did what we had to do, which was win, but ultimately, it wasn't really in our hands really because, you know, it would have taken Green Bay to obviously lost their game for us to obviously get in. And, based on how the season's gone, I think Green Bay probably deserved that place more than us just based on merit, I think. Um, I think Tyler Lockett for me had a game where if this is probably his final game as a Seahawk, then, you know, what a good game he had. It just class personified pretty much his whole football career. And, to have if he does go, which I think he probably will because of just contract reasons, really, what a miss we're gonna have. Just I think he have been the sort of, figure for us on offense is gonna be like, to replace that is just I don't think you really can replace that based on what he's shown. I think he's very replaceable. How we do that is really anyone's guess. Um, but I do think the game was good. I think we did our job. Gino again, just being crazy in the fourth. He's had 7 go-ahead touchdown passes in the fourth quarter / overtime this season. I believe that's the most in a single season in NFL history, um, which is completely mental. So it just goes to show that, you know, when the capacity to be great is there for Gino, you can be that player. The problem is probably the other 3 quarters is, just a huge question mark, and I don't think he even really had the best of games. So I think yeah, we did our job, but ultimately we probably were more of a pretender than a contender in terms of making the playoffs. And uh, congrats to Green Bay because I think they deserve that more.
Yeah, I mean, Green Bay, got to give them credit because they are the youngest team to ever make a playoff. And, I have a lot of things I can say about Green Bay that I could be positive about. I mean, I've got to apologize for what I called Matt the Floor, Matt the Fraud for a lot this season. I think I've been proved massively wrong. Jordan Love appears to be the guy, and I don't know whether he'll be a Hall of Famer like Aaron Rodgers, but he's getting better every week. And I think that's got Javan. That's really got you in it. That
Oh my, Matt LaFleur.
oh God.
I
I mean,
can't.
it just seemed for a while that he just wasn't the same with that Rodgers, but recently he's just it's been great, and I think that I said it on Twitter earlier on, and it's a nice segue actually to our next point is Brian Flores reportedly wanted Jordan Love over Tua. And I got to say, I think Brian Flores might be right. Because Jordan Love has done a lot more, I think, already in big games in 6 games in his career than Tua's done in his whole 4 years. Now, people say to me, oh, look at the Cowboys game, etc., etc. But that wasn't him. That was down to a 15-yard flag that got us in the field goal range. He was not the reason why. I mean, I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback. I'm not. I think people seem to think in our group chat I've got and the fan groups that I'm a Tua hater. I'm not. I think he's a good quarterback, but I just think he lacks that killer instinct, that clutchness, that Josh Allen for them. Josh Allen, I'll mention now because
Oh,
we didn't.
we'll get to him.
Yeah, I mean he threw 3 turnovers in that game on Sunday Night Football, but that doesn't matter because he still went down the field, did made the plays when necessary and gotten the win. And I think he's done that time and time again. Whereas I think Tua, sadly, hasn't got that. I mean, it was a 21-14 loss, which ultimately saw the Bills win in the AFC East. You look at two of his picks, both of them were thrown to double coverage, and they were terrible, terrible decisions. And McDaniels is a little bit of stick as well because we seem to neglect the run once again, which he seemed to do a lot of last season, and neglect the run. And yeah, I think that we've ultimately bottled it. I'm not going to lie. We've now got to play the Chiefs in our head, and if you win that, it's Baltimore in M&T Bank. Whereas if you win that game against Buffalo, you're the 2 seed. You could beat the Bills again. Then you could play either the Browns or the Texans or the Steelers. Then you've probably got a chance of an AFC Championship game, which you probably would have lost to the Ravens. But it's frustrating because Burrow's injured, Sean Watson's injured, Aaron Rodgers is injured, and there's Justin Herbert got injured. There's so many. Obviously, he wouldn't done much because Brandon Staley was there, but you get my point. So many quarterbacks were injured, and there's not going to be a year like it again where there's that many quarterbacks, particularly in a conference where it's so strong in a position, will get injured. So for me, it was our chance to do that. I think we mentioned before about the Titans sacking Vrabel. Their chance was probably in 2021. And it feels like that was our chance this year. You look at that Titans game we played against them in week 15. If you win that game, that Cowboys win would have won us the division. And we could have afforded to rest starters in the Bills game. We wouldn't have mattered so much. So for me, I think that game's going to really come back and haunt this franchise, I think. Unless next year or even this year, we do well in the playoffs, we shock everyone and beat these teams away from home. But I think that have a chance to be the number 2 seed and win or win at least one of those games. And obviously the Chiefs, the Bills, obviously no one thought they were going to go on and, beat the Cowboys and beat the Chiefs like they did. But yeah, for me, it's just frustrating because it was there for the taking, especially a Titans game where we were 14 points up with 3 minutes left. It just seemed like this is our year to try and at least have a deep run and win a playoff game for the first time in years. But I think it's going to be, once again, back to a drawing board, another playoff lost in the first round and not knowing where to go from here. But I will say at the same time, injuries have been a big factor. We have got a lot of injuries now. I like to see what we do when we have Ramsey, Holland, Xavier Howard all healthy. We have Phillips and Chubb all healthy with Wilkins if he signs a new deal. Waddle and Hill both healthy. Offensive line all healthy at the same time. I think that most it as well. So for me, yes, I'm annoyed, but at the same time, we have got a lot of injuries, and that we have to. Every team has injuries, but I think at the same time, this has happened to us a lot more than I think most teams this year. But what was your take on the game in the end?
I think, listen, like the Dolphins, it was just one of those games where you can be efficient as you want. Like if I go look at how Miami actually did, I actually think they did fairly well. Especially with their full team, was I just thought they were highly efficient. But when the Bills can play like this, when you have the capacity to put up nearly 500 total yards, Josh Allen just having those Josh Allen games where, yes, he's throwing interceptions, but again, I think it just goes down to you describe it as killer instinct. I just look at it as just the capacity to be great. When we look at what greatness is when doing your best is not good enough. It's no longer good enough. You have to be more than doing your best. You have to be great. I look at it as a capacity to be great. You look at a player like Josh Allen, capacity to be great. Jordan Love, going back to him with Green Bay. I don't think Green Bay really should be in the position that they're in, but probably because of the fact that Jordan Love has this capacity to be great, more probably than Tua, you're seeing Green Bay push to a playoff push. Same with, like countless players that we've seen in the NFL in terms of quarterbacks, receivers, defensive players. There's so many. My problem is just more with Tua. It's just I don't know whether he has that greatness capability built in, or is it something he needs to develop over time? Now, the development over time is pretty hard because if you give him time to develop, how long till you then come to the conclusion, okay, he doesn't have the capability to be great? Is it too late, or are you, or have people already given up at a time where he could maybe have maybe a year or two to find it again? I'm not too sure. That's for Dolphins fans to really answer. But going back to the game itself, look, it was just one of those games where it's just when Buffalo play like this, what you really have to do is just put your hands together and pray that they're just ineffective when scoring. And these days, when Josh Allen has games like this, I don't know how he's not a Pro Bowler this year for some reason. I just find that very bizarre. But when they play like this, little teams can. I don't really think much teams can really stop them.
I mean, I think their team almost they beat themselves more than teams beat them. You know,
Yeah,
Allen. I will say the first touchdown was the luckiest touchdown I've ever seen. I mean, I mean, it was a great catch. The catch was amazing, but the actual to make the throw and hit a lineman and bounce off him and go towards Sherfield that was fortunate. Obviously, the touchdown and the punt return. So I think only really one touchdown came from Allen, but I think at the same time, we know Allen what he can do, and I think that he they mentioned on the game that he's like John Elway. I think he's John Elway and Brett Favre combined. I think he has that Brett Favre tendency to throw picks carelessly, but can also win your games in the same day. So for me, I think that Josh Allen is something that I don't think two will have, and I think that you can develop your arm strength, you can develop your mobility, you can develop strength, but you can't really teach clutchness. I don't think it's something you can teach. I think it's something that you either got or you haven't got. I think only sportsmen have it, and I think that sadly he doesn't. Now, there's absolutely nowhere to move off from him unless obviously someone goes to drop Mahomes. But I think at the same time, I do think we have the potential to be trapped because our team will be too good. I think for now, for the next 10 years, to be a number one pick unless you trade up or mortgage your future. But we're never going to be. I don't think we're going to be once Tyreek Hill leaves. We're never going to be that good sort of to be winning championships. So I think that window's now, and I do feel like we're wasting it now. I think Tua's had some good games, but Javan, name me a big game. He's had 4. He's had 4 years. It's not. He's not a rookie. He's not a sophomore. He's had 4 years in this league. Name me a big game where he has turned it up down the stretch, especially because you can mention the Ravens game in week 2, whatever it was last year. Name me a big game down the stretch where Tua's been the reason they've won the game, or even done stuff to win a game. Name me a game.
this is the problem. I don't think he has
That's my point.
a game.
The Cowboys game, he was good in that game. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't the reason why I won that game. It was the flag and a field goal. And Jason Sanders had 5 field goals, only one touchdown for 2. And I'm so tired of Dolphins fans trying to defend him. And you can't. I've been in many group chats, and you can't say anything. You can't criticize Tua in group chats or on Twitter because they come for you. They come for you saying, "Oh, give him time," and excuse after excuse. But every quarterback has to succeed. Lamar Jackson hasn't got Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle. His receivers are probably good, but not great. Joe Burrow was the most sacked quarterback in playoff history. They made the playoffs. He can't. He has
Yeah.
excuses. All these quarterbacks I'm mentioning, like Aaron Rodgers, if he played, would have done well with a bad O line in the Jets. And all these, every quarterback has adversities. Josh Allen throws picks. That's his own fault, but he has adversities. He gets through them. Two, I'm sick and tired of him trying to defend this man because yes, he's not a bad quarterback, and yes, he is good. He's passing yards leader, but he's not even in the top 5 passing touchdowns. So that suggests to me that you can get it down the field, but you can't get it converted to it when it matters in the end zone. So for me, yeah, I feel like this would be something that could be clipped up against me in the future, but I don't think we'll ever win a Super Bowl because of Tua. I think we can win Super Bowls because of our defense with Vic Fangio. You can win Super Bowl from either Raheem Mostert or A-Chain or maybe Tyreek Hill extending a 5-yard pass, making it a 90-yard touchdown. But Tua will never win a Super Bowl for your team. He'll never ever be the reason you win a Super Bowl. He's basically Kirk Cousins. He is Kirk Cousins 2.0.
Okay. I'm glad you've brought him up because that basically leads into a question that I want to ask you. So, do you think you need a QB that I mean your answer is probably going to give it away here. Do you need a QB that can manage the game the best, or do you need a QB who sometimes can manage the game, but more often than not has the ability to change a game?
I want someone who can win you games. I would much rather Eli Manning when he was playing because Eli Manning was pretty average. He wasn't great in the regular season. Didn't have actually that many playoff seasons. But when it mattered and it comes down to the clutch, same with Nick Foles. I wouldn't want Nick Foles, but you know what I mean. Same with Nick Foles. When it mattered down the stretch in the playoffs, they come up with trumps. And I think that, the team we have, we could have made the playoffs. I think even if we had Eli Manning not his best, I think that that's what you need to win Super. I don't care what you do in weeks 1 to 15. I don't care if you're putting up all these numbers in games against the Commanders and the Jets who had Trevor Simeon. I don't care whether you put these numbers up in the regular season. I care about when it comes to big game, when it matters, my quarterback doing it when it matters. And frankly, he hasn't. Now, I don't want to knock him because I want him to come good, and I think that Mahomes sort of starts his career and has made everyone think a quarterback has to be good in their first 2 years. But it's been 4 years now, and I think that I'll give him time because he has got certain traits that I like. He's accurate at times, and when everything's going right and everyone's healthy, he can be a good game manager. But I just don't think he is ever going to be a top five quarterback. I don't think he's ever going to win an MVP. I don't think he'll ever win Offensive Player of the Year. I don't think he'll win Super Bowl. If he wins Super Bowl this year, I don't think he'll win Super Bowl MVP. I think it'll be Tyreek Hill or our defense. So I think personally, there's a lot to be worried about in terms of our future and being like a Tomlins or Steelers, like at 8 and 9 every year, and never really doing much. So for me, there's a lot of worries, but you never know. There's playoffs coming now. He's never played in the playoffs before. I will say that. Maybe he'll turn up now. Maybe he'll find some sort of clutch gene that he had in Alabama, albeit one game. He had one game in Alabama where that happened. He got so for me, yeah. So for me, it's time now to Chiefs Arrowhead next week. You've got to do it. Otherwise, yes, I think people will start really, really questioning your sort of NFL legacy. But we will end it there because we are running short on time. Before we do go though, quickly for you, my vote is now Lamar Jackson. Who is your MVP vote going to?
It has to be Lamar Jackson. I just think he's been, again, everything you've described that Tua probably isn't, and that's a game changer.
Yeah, and of course, we mentioned before about Tua not playing well against good teams, whereas Lamar Jackson has done it against all the good teams. Did it against the 49ers, did it against the Dolphins, and every big game he's been given this year, especially, he's done it. And I said before, without a Tyreek Hill, without a Jamar Chase, without an AJ Brown, Zay Flowers, Shaw Bateman, Beckham, they aren't bad, but they're good. They're not elite receivers. So to do what he's doing, I think now, especially with Tyreek Hill making some drops in recent weeks, I think it has to be him. And finally, my vote is Chiefs Niners. It has been since pretty much week 4, week 5. But who is your Super Bowl matchup going to be in February?
I think it's also going to be Chiefs Niners. I will say this about the AFC. I like Baltimore. They've always had a stellar year, but I still don't think in the AFC there's a definitive best team. As much as I think all these teams in the AFC have been performing well, we know what the answer probably most likely is. That's the Chiefs just finding a way just to get into the Super Bowl somehow.
Yeah, that's it, because I think that we mentioned just before actually that, playoffs is a different animal. And, there's a reason why the only active start quarterbacks to have won Super Bowls are Mahomes and Stafford. No one else in the UFC has even made a Super Bowl that I can think of, starting quarterbacks who are in the playoffs. So for me, I think everyone's criticised the Chiefs, like the Bills early on in the season, but come to the playoffs, I think Mahomes and Kelsey are still going to be their old selves. Maybe one last dance for Kelsey, but either way, it's going to be, I think they'll still do it. Now, before we go, actually, thank you for coming on, first of all, Girvane. Now, your predictions. Now, the Seahawks went 9-7. Can you guess what your prediction was start of the year?
I believe it was. I believe it was something. I think it was 11-6.
It was, yeah. So you were
Yeah.
too far off, but you were a bit, still a bit far away. But yeah, that's where we'll end it today. We'll end our Week 18 review. We'll catch you next time for some preview episodes for our upcoming wildcard round games. See you guys then.
Yeah.